Well, John Hamlett, thank you very much for sharing the POW with us.
Thank you.
Would you take us through pre-production and the concept from script to casting?
Yeah, it was quite a rush pre-production job really. When I'd seen a bit of the work done on the 5D, one of the new HD DSLRs coming out, suddenly thought this is the time I want to be actually starting to make films rather than just think about it, because the quality allows that much more of a cinematic feel to the work. So I set about starting to write something and hire the camera. And the story basically surrounds, or was generated from a couple of bits of costume, including that greatcoat, and a location that's near me at Carnforth, which is the railway area, the train yard. And so it kind of came about from that. And obviously limitations like having one key actor, you know, having to just, for a period film, you know, stay in places like the woods and on this rail yard. And that's how it originated, and came together over about 2 weeks before we started shooting.
Brilliant, brilliant. There's some historical context to tie-ins. The tower which we saw blowing up, would you like to tell us about that? Because it's like a text with the POW, isn't it?
When I was basically knocked on the door of the train yard and said, you know, can I use this for a film and so on, and they were quite wary at first, but then showed me around so I could have a quick site visit. And the technical manager there was saying how a lot of the buildings on the railway yard were actually built in the Second World War by Italian POWs who had risen over here. And that, tying back to the character in the role, obviously people have a kind of misconception about prisoners in the war and so on, and that they sort of great escape lifestyle, digging tunnels and stuff. But most prisoners of war who weren't officers were basically used as sort of slave labour, especially in Germany, slave labour, and over here conscripted labour. So they never really thought about escaping or digging tunnels or anything like that, because they were just worn out from 12 to 16 hours a day of hard work. So yeah.
Very good. Right, it's fast-paced, there's action going on, explosions, you've got planes flying over, CGI. How did that come about? How do you fit that in?
My background's in sort of multimedia and digital media, and so sort of using things like After Effects is quite entertaining and, you know, an enjoyable process. The actual sort of CGI animated elements are really just the aircraft coming over, and that's a friend of mine who works in Cinema 4D, so I sort of conscripted him into spend a little time, and he could have gone and bought the models online sort of thing and just modified them and animated them going over, but he's a stickler, so he decided to sort of build them from scratch and get the old Airfix plans out and sort of redraw them and make them his own. But of course, by the time we'd made them, and incredible detail to them, and I just blurred them and darkened them so you couldn't see them at all, really. So completely ruined everything you did.
We all love an Airfix, man. Right, okay. You use a technique called guerrilla shooting. It keeps can you explain to the guys here what, how that works and what it means?
The way I see guerrilla shooting is that it's just getting in places quickly, doing your work, usually handheld, not necessarily getting permissions to film, to get the stuff you need without having to go through the long and tedious process of actually signing off at every level. In this case, the train yard could have been shot guerrilla at night. There would have been lots of safety implications. So we did actually get permission to film there first and get a safety briefing. But using...
Privately. By must be 60 pence up to 6.
And obviously Forestry Commission aren't probably too happy about having sort of uniformed, armed, supposedly armed people wandering around their plantations. So yeah, a bit of guerrilla shooting on that side of things.
Right.
Get in and out quickly.
Brilliant, brilliant. That's awesome. Thank you for that. Right, okay. Bear with me a second. You've got. I looked at your website. You're looking at making the POW2.
Yeah.
Could you explain that for us?
There's not a lot to explain at the moment.
Okay, so
this at the moment is being entered into film festivals, and it's not. It's the first time I've entered film festivals, and I didn't know how extremely competitive they are. And so, really, I suppose looking for a little bit more little bit more of a reception in order to then inspire me to sort of get on with it and actually sort of pull the stops out and start making another. But the amount of time I've spent on this, not just in production and post-production, because post-production was the long sort of slog of a few months of working on it. But actually then trying to follow that with film festivals and publicity and sort of designing posters and just trying to generally, and the website itself, just trying in general to make it a bigger and more successful project and get it a larger audience. So that takes a lot of time. So POW2 is potentially on the cards for a lot longer.
Very good.
We'll see.
Okay, so we got the first production, the POW1. The importance of low budget filmmaking, independent filmmaking. The budget is key, isn't it?
Yeah.
Would you be kind enough to tell us how much it cost and how you went about blagging this thing?
£400 is the total budget. £70 of that is on stock footage for the compositing of the bombing scene and so on. £200 odd was on hiring the 5D and a couple of lenses for that. A bit of pizza, a few sound effects, chocolate biscuits. That was basically the entire budget. And yeah, the importance of small filmmaking. Just a name drop. This premiered at Keswick Film Festival last weekend, I think. Last weekend. And John Hamlett has become a new patron there, and he saw it, and he was, I can't say he was raving about this film in particular, but I spoke to him afterwards and we had a good chat, and he was saying the benefit of these small films, doesn't matter how small, is that they then feed the sort of large films, and those films feed on the big stuff. And it's the same with the festivals. The small festivals like this one feed into the larger festivals, and that's how the industry survives. And he was very, absolutely adamant about that. To have an independent film industry at all is all about having productions like this and film festivals like this. So absolutely essential if we don't want to just be watching the usual stuff that is ground out all the time.
Very good, very right. Something which people are interested in. It's a cliched question, it's basic. But influences, what drove you into filming and your passion for the moving image?
Never thought about that really. I grew up in the countryside, so it wasn't a case of going to the cinema every weekend or anything like that. I'd just sit on the television, sit on the sofa every Saturday afternoon and watch the sort of afternoon movies that they chucked on. So there were all the old 1940s sort of John Mills things. So that probably was an early sort of influence into the war movies. I watched Ice Cold and Alex again the other day and absolutely loved it, and decided I really must sort of dig out everything like that and just watch them over and over again. That's probably my strongest first influence into film is that side of things.
Brilliant. Right, would anyone else, any questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
Just a simple question about the budget. How much do the costumes cost? Where did you get them?
What? Sorry, what?
The costumes.
The costumes.
Where did you get them?
The greatcoat was part of the reason for. The greatcoat was part of the reason for writing this as a story and that as a character, because I had that. That belonged to a local guy who'd been in Home Guard, so it's a sort of authentic greatcoat. And if you see it firsthand, it's got so much, little moth holes and whatever. It looks perfect. So that kind of inspired the character. The German costumes were basically just begged off army surplus stores, so they're post-war German greatcoats, and again dressed with some sort of cardboard with gaffer tape type belts with a bit of silver foil on the front. There's a few items that are very close up that I borrowed, German belt buckle and a gas mask container or something, and the helmet itself for that close up. And they were a local collector and just borrowed these things and said, promise to look after them, just for that one shot, rather than the distant stuff. And the weapons are just cheap airsoft guns, so again, just perfect replicas of whatever for sort of 25 quid each. That was 50 quid of the budget gone on airsoft. Yeah.
What about the green fingerless gloves?
My wife's. Yeah, I reckon they'll be from Monsoon or something like that. Yeah, it's surprisingly good.
Okay, does anyone else want to throw a question? Cool. Oh, go on.
Is there any particular reason why you chose Westphalia?
Chose where, sorry?
Westphalia in Birmingham.
Historically it was kind of the idea that obviously there had to be a reason why he was running, but at the same time a reason why potentially you wouldn't expect him to be running. So, you know, the war's nearly over kind of thing. The fact that, you know, there'd be a low altitude raid on a station or something of such a small area rather than a big city or a big factory area or whatever, sort of all ties into this idea that, yes, it's the end of the war. The advancing sort of Allied armies are far away. So yeah, it had to be really sort of that kind of Western Germany area, because obviously the Eastern area was more concerned about the Russians advancing and stuff. So yeah.
Thank you very much, gentleman there.
I've got a particular interest in how the concept of the films are formed.
Yeah.
So I was interested in how you gauged how much of a story fits in this film and how much you can leave to presume to be before and after the events in the film, and how it bookended.
Yeah. Again, probably not the best question to ask me, because this is the first piece I've ever written, and I've got no experience or background or education in writing. So everything was more of a gut sort of feeling, really. Not trying to do too much, but trying to do enough, and obviously, don't like to call it flashback, but sort of splitting the narrative so it was jumping back and forth in order to be able to get the story in, but as well as some of the action rather than just have it afterwards. But yeah, that's probably as much as I could say on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, we touched on pre-production, production, post-production in IMAD.
Yeah.
How did you fare with it?
Editing was over very quickly because everything was storyboarded. I think every shot except for one area where we had to change stuff around, because at the train yard when we got there, they'd moved a few of the trains around, so every shot had to be moved because you couldn't shoot where you were thinking you were going to shoot. So yeah, editing went through very quickly. The speed which shot caused problems in that we didn't record any audio at all for the 2 days of shooting, except for the POW's voice in the actual interrogation. So that meant tons of Foley work, tons of sound effects work, which I enjoyed immensely, but takes forever. As well as the special effects, which are fairly obvious and time-consuming, because my machine sort of slows down to a halt when you've got about 20 layers of Alford high-definition special effects footage on top of each other. There were lots of small gaffes, bits where, for instance, the grey coat was a bit too open. You could see a large piece of gaffer tape holding things together, and so that was another, you know, one shot like that, that's another day trying to get that sorted out so you can use the shot, and hopefully none of it's very apparent. But yeah, there's a lot of time spent on that as well.
Very good. That's our time over. John Hamlett, thank you very much for the POW.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing all that information.